practicing my violin. I had already mastered the assigned piece, so like a typical ambitious beginner, I thought, why not skip ahead a bit, be fancy, and learn the next piece in the book? After rewatching the video 1,000 times, and of course, 1,000 ads, I learned it. And you know that feeling when you finally get it and feel like you climbed the mountain, so you start dancing on top? That's what I felt like at that moment. So I kept repeating it because it sounded like music to my ears, quite literally. The next time I had a lesson, it turned out I had one wrong note. I had practiced lots of times, so I knew the piece by heart, and so did my fingers. But I couldn't stop repeating the same mistake over and over again. This is where my finger went. And that's where it was supposed to go. In fact, why don't we test this right now? First, I'm going to play the piece how I remembered it, so the incorrect version. And then I'm going to play it how it was supposed to sound like, the thing I was supposed to remember. Let's see if you can notice the difference between the two. We've got version 1. And then version 2. Okay. I want you to raise your hand if you heard the difference between those two. Okay. To all the people who just raised their hands, you have an amazing musical ear. And to all those who didn't, congratulations. You just successfully ignored a mistake I've been emotionally attached to for a year. Okay. So, as you would probably guess, after not getting the note correct so many times in a row, I got frustrated, so I allowed it to practice for the other day. I grabbed my phone and started scrolling through some random stuff on my social media. You know, the usual news, ads, and content. But something caught my eye. It was an African proverb, and it said, "A cat that dreams of becoming a lion must lose its appetite for rats." This might seem crazy, but at first, my overthinking brain thought my own phone was laughing at me. It was basically like the algorithm was saying, if you wish to improve, you must learn to get this one note correct. But that led me to an important question, bigger than just the wrong note. And I want to ask you as well. If mistakes are supposed to teach us something, how come we never stop making them? And like any other question before, I did my favorite thing. I researched the science behind it. After reading through lots of articles, I found that one of the main causes of repeating mistakes more than just once is something called the autopilot effect. And no, it doesn't connect to planes. Unfortunately, because I could have used a quick escape at that point. So, what is it exactly? Our brains have a tool called procedural memory, or as a lot of you might have heard it get called, muscle memory. It helps us remember actions using repetition. And most of the time, we don't even know. Simple actions such as typing, tying our shoelaces, or even smiling are parts of our daily lives that most often run on autopilot. And it's a very useful skill because imagine what life would look like when even a task such as brushing your teeth requires your undivided attention. But sometimes the same tool is working against us. That explains why I couldn't stop repeating the same wrong note. My brain had already moved it from the undivided attention to the less attention pile. And trust me, I wasn't part of that decision. With that knowledge, I stopped practicing the piece for a while, realizing that repetition only made things worse. It made me feel better for a bit. Still, it wasn't enough to permanently satisfy me. If you've ever had one of those moments where you really wanted to get something right, you'll know what I'm talking about. For me, that's about every single one. And that was one of those occasions. So I reviewed my options. 1. I could complain about it and do nothing. 2. I could tick it off my to-do list without actually doing it, for productivity. And 3. I could get myself together and fix it. Really, there was only one choice good enough. Instead of just hoping that this time I remember the correct notes, I tried to learn how to remove the problem from its roots. But how do I even do that? After rephrasing my search about 1,000 times, because apparently the first 999 weren't an actual thing, I found a very intriguing article by Loughborough University, and it said something very interesting. We only see parts of the world, and we tend to notice things which are repeating, whether it's a pattern or just a coincidence. And so, our brains create something we like creating more than we actually admit. Shortcuts. We keep returning to them because they feel comfortable, and all of us do it, whether we realize it or not. But sometimes, our brain creates shortcuts that don't lead to the same place as the safer and longer path. And so, those are called bad shortcuts, and we all have them. Luckily, this article didn't leave me on a cliffhanger like most do. There were 3 clear and simple things you could do to work towards stopping mistakes. Now, notice I said work towards, because depending on how many times you've made the mistake already, that could change how much you have to work to remove it from your brain's server. The first thing is something a lot of us don't like hearing, but it's coming from science, not me. Don't attack the messenger. We have to start being more comfortable with making mistakes. What I mean by that is that we need to be more relaxed when we make mistakes. And I know it seems like the typical cliche you hear every day from some sort of motivational speaker or quote, but there's actually a reason behind it. The more guilty, ashamed, or anxious you feel when making a mistake, the more you try to hide it or forget about it, the more likely you are to repeat it. When we aren't feeling so down, our brains have a bigger opportunity to take on new information to help us correct their mistakes. And you've probably heard this before, but stop to ask yourself now, do you actually follow it? Not blaming myself makes me get better, don't you worry, or sometimes I do, I think. Are you actually okay with making mistakes? If you're not okay with making mistakes, then don't worry. It's just a goal to work towards, right? If you are, please teach me. But keep in mind that this sounds easier in theory than in practice. The other 2 ways are a bit more pleasant to work on than the one I just mentioned. Temporarily quitting and stopping to repeat the task you're struggling with. When you keep repeating it and getting it wrong, you get easily frustrated and your patience levels drop dramatically, along with your cognitive strength. When you take a break, you give a break to that pathway and it isn't so recent. Just keep in mind that if you stop learning the violin piece for a while like me, when you pick it up again, it won't be magically learned. I realized that, for example, if you're finding something challenging in work or school, you can't just pick up your stuff and leave in the middle of class. But maybe you can ask to take a short walk or just a few deep breaths on the spot to help you relax. Think of it as clearing some of the brain fogginess that comes from too much thinking at once. A really interesting article from the New York Times said something very important, and not to exaggerate, but kind of predicted the future. Lindsay Krause argues that quitting is a strength. All of our lives, we have been told in some way, shape, or form that quitting isn't good and you should persevere. What if I told you this mindset doesn't help you stop making mistakes? That is exactly what Ms. Krause said. She was talking about how Simone Biles withdrew from the Olympics, choosing herself and her long-term success over the short win. Now, you might ask, how exactly did she predict the future? Well, this article was published in 2021, when Simone Biles had lost an opportunity. But now, in 2026, we can see how after that decision, she came back even stronger and is even better than before. So, here I am, 5 years later, telling you the same thing she told us before. Quitting isn't a weakness. And to be clear here, I'm not dismissing perseverance. Perseverance is great. But sometimes, the way forward is to stop repeating the same path. Now that I had this article as well, I felt like I had all the pieces to fix the wrong note. So I went up to my room, picked up my violin, and started playing the piece again. I got the note wrong. I put the violin down, took a deep breath, and decided to try one more time but if I didn't get it right, I was about ready to throw the violin at the wall. So I started playing it, and after tons of practice, research, and a whole TED talk, my finger finally decided to listen. It was about time. So, in the end, it wasn't working hard that helped me. It was changing the way I was doing it. So I asked myself once more, if mistakes are lessons, why do we keep repeating it? But maybe, just maybe, the real question is, why do we keep choosing the same path, yet expect a different destination? Thank you.